practice of listening in on electronic communication, specifically telephone lines, to securely monitor a conversation. After reading this definition, wiretapping can seem very frightening to some individuals, but when it's utilized in the correct way, wiretapping is an effective tool used to prevent crimes and terrorist attacks, but it infringes on our privacy rights and personal liberties as Americans. On September 11, 2001, our country experienced a horrific terrorist attack, and unfortunately, thousands of innocent Americans lost their lives. But that does not give the NSA and FBI the right to wiretap without a warrant. It is illegal. Warrants must be required to help protect American citizens for wiretapping while not violating the privacy rights of American citizens. We will prove this in two disadvantages today against warrantless wiretapping. Warrantless wiretapping is not a necessity. The process of getting a warrant for a wiretap might be a bit of a time-consuming process, but it is the legal way to do it. Some might argue about the time constraints that are impeding on the capture of criminals, but either way, we must follow the law here. Now, the Patriot Act was passed that does give government agencies a 72-hour window to get a warrant after the wiretapping is processed, but it still has to have a warrant nonetheless. So what's the big problem with getting a warrant? I assume it is a bit difficult to administer the added paperwork, but without them, how can anyone know who or why they are wiretapping people? Are we just supposed to trust them when they say they already have proof? I don't think they can be trusted. It is too easy to make a mistake and destroy someone's life without oversight. It does not take long to get a warrant, wiretap or otherwise, after applying for it. It does take time to get the information together to support a warrant request, but that is what makes it a necessity. Information needs to be gathered so that there is probable cause to wiretap somebody. Respect needs to be given to certain communications under our privacy. It is legal to wiretap with a warrant, but if it's warrantless, it's an invasion of privacy. Former President George W. Bush basically summarized what is needed before the government can wiretap an individual. He stated that in order for someone to be legally wiretapped, FBI or NSA agents must acquire a court order or a warrant in order to complete this action. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States states the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. That includes warrantless wiretapping. Because the expectation of privacy is crucial to distinguish a legitimate, reasonable police search and seizure from an unreasonable one. We have reasonable explanation of privacy when using our home phone. In Katz versus the U.S., the court stated that a person has reasonable expectation of privacy when using a phone booth, even though it isn't within the confines of their home. In Katz versus United States, 389 U.S. 347 in 1967, Justice Harlan issued a concurring opinion articulating the two-part test later adopted by the U.S. Supreme Court as a test to determine whether a police or government search is subject to the limitations of the Fourth Amendment. 1. The governmental actions must contravene an individual's actual or subjective expectation of privacy, and that the expectation of privacy must be reasonable, in the sense that society in general would recognize it as such.
All right. Cross-examination.
I introduce myself.
Yeah.
I'm Shemai Henderson, and I'm their attacker. And the questions I have for you, if there are already established loopholes for this legal process, what is the point of it, and is national security? Established loopholes, because you said that they can wiretap and then they have 72 hours to get a warrant. So if there's established loopholes already, why should we even require the warrant in the first place?
The established loopholes weren't actually part of the original act. It was instituted in the Patriot Act after 2011. So before, we were talking about the last 20 years, it wasn't legal for them to wiretap first and then ask questions later. So either way, a warrant is getting issued. I know the loophole is there, but either way, a warrant is eventually going to have to be issued. So either way, it's not going to be warrantless wiretapping. If it is, it's only for 72 hours. And if they don't get the required information that they need, they have to get the warrant.
Okay, well, is national security a necessity to you?
Well, I don't talk talk on the phone very much. I'm deaf, so it doesn't really affect me in particular, but I guess it's important for some people who have their communications monitored, but I don't think the security is going to be any more threatened if they get a warrant. It's not going to take them that extra day to get the warrant. It's not going to be a time-consuming process just to say, oh, okay, well, this guy's a terrorist. Okay, well, we can wait a day and then get a warrant. It's not going to be a big deal.
So it's not a big deal to fight against terrorism?
Do you have statistics to support that how many terrorists have been caught with a warrantless wiretap?
Well, I know that 54 terrorist attacks have been prevented because of wiretapping since 9/11 from the NSA director. I don't have a thing with me. And so the question is catching a criminal not a necessity?
All right, that's time.
Okay. then.
Okay.
My name is Josh Eaman, and I will be doing the negative constructive. Did you get that? Good.
What's your name again? Sorry.
Josh Eaman.
All right.
So this argument boils down to a utilitarianism effect that, despite the fact that privacy is important for the greater good of the nation, it is important to establish that national security is important and must be addressed so that we do have the ability to practice those privacies. So the importance of this debate is a matter of national security over privacy, national security that leads to safety and gives confidence to the people that they live in a civilized culture, not a war zone. According to Jim Jones of CNN News, in analyzing post-9/11 wiretapping, it is necessary to analyze the effects that its use has had on national security and domestic society. In the realm of national security, wiretapping has proven to be instrumental in the identification and prosecution of terrorists, effectively helping diminish this threat. In the domestic realm, wiretapping has proven to be an effective means of preventing terrorist attacks in the United States and of putting Americans at ease. Without less restrictions on wiretapping for the sake of national security, we risk the civilized culture for the sake of personal and selfish desires for privacy. My main disadvantage is that limiting national security agencies like the NSA or the FBI puts the United States at risk of another massive terrorist attack on U.S. soil. So authorities are required to get or obtain super warrants. They're called super warrants because they're so hard to get whenever they intercept oral, electronic, or wire communication. Interception of these communications is commonly called electronic surveillance or wiretapping. So if national security agencies are limited in their ability to acquire this information by the implementation of requiring warrants for every bit of information that they gather, the United States will lose its edge in acquiring information that strengthens national security. And so if the U.S. is limited in its ability to acquire information and strengthen national security, the U.S. will fall victim to another massive terrorist attack on U.S. soil. According to the Global Terrorism Index, the United States is ranked top 25% in the highest targeted countries in the world. There are 53 foreign groups that have been identified by the United States government as especially dangerous to America. These groups have ample interest in striking the United States, though actually doing so is not an easy task. Anti-American objectives are not sufficient on mounting an attack against the United States from primary bases outside America because extremely difficult due to our heightened national security since the 9/11 terrorist attacks and how wiretapping helps that. So if we hinder security agencies' ability to provide security by the consumption of pivotal information, we run the risk of lowering that security and falling victim to another terrorist attack. My second disadvantage is that unwarranted wiretapping in the context of national security is fully within the constitutional rights of the president. Currently, the people are trying to limit the president and national security agencies under him the ability to implement warranted wiretapping by saying it violates the Fourth Amendment rights as well as personal liberties and privacies. Article 2 of the Constitution, the Executive Power Clause, gives the President the responsibility to protect, and in that responsibility, it obviously gives the President the power to protect the country. As well as there are pieces of legislation such as the authorization for use of military forces in response to the 9/11 attacks, and the Protect America Act of 2007 that also greatly increased the power of the executive by permitting the executive to order the use of force, including wiretaps against national security threats, with little to no judicial oversight. So if we limit unwarranted wiretaps, we will be prohibiting the President and the security agencies under him the ability to carry out their constitutional right, as well as we will deny an incredibly effective resource because we are against the minimally intrusive nature of wiretapping. In taking the authority of the time.
Hi, my name is Matthew Hart, and I'll be asking some questions. So let's go back to your first point. You related giving consent for wiretaps like to a TSA bag search, but isn't it true that when you take your bag to the airport or something, you're giving consent to what you put in the bag to be going through? You know that someone's going to be looking through. So how is it any different than having your conversations monitored like TSA?
So in the argument of privacy and that being an invasion of privacy, the point is that in the TSA searching your bags, it's a very much more publicated invasion of your privacy. They're rifling through your things, as well as full body scanners. I'm talking about an invasion of your privacy, people being able to see you and every little bit of you. So I'm saying that violation of privacy is a far more intimate and a very far more publicized invasion of privacy rather than national security program going through emails and then red flagging words that you said that will relate to national security.
All right. And then, so you're claiming Article 2 in the President's oversight, and he has the power to protect the nation, but also in the Constitution, that's where they started having the checks and balances, and a warrant is one way to check, the executive branch and carrying out of things, to check their power and make sure they're not overstepping their rights, and that's why a warrant is there to oversee that they're not overstepping it. So why would Article 2 give the President power over checks and balances which are there to check his power? What makes it more important?
I agree that checks and balances in most contexts can be very important, but just like in 2001, the President actually doesn't have the ability to declare war. That's a Congress's ability. But Bush declared war in response to a massive terrorist attack on U.S. soil. So just in the same way that where situations will require vast actions and actions that may supersede some of those checks and balances, in the majority of everyday circumstances, checks and balances are amazing and work really well. But in terms where national security is put at risk, I think for the sake of keeping America safe, we can step around that process and trust that the national security agencies and the President are working their hardest to instill national security and our safety.
It's time.
Okay, again, I'm Shemai Henderson, I'm the attack. And they did a great job at explaining the need for wiretap, and warrants are good and they do serve a purpose, but in the age filled with technology and information, we have to be quicker than terrorists. And I totally agree with the points of wiretapping. It's one of the best ways to catch criminals. However, there are extreme circumstances where national security trumps the process of obtaining a warrant, and limiting wiretapping by requiring a warrant will put the U.S. at risk of another terrorist attack. Warrants take a valuable time to actually prevent a crime instead of catch a criminal when the crime has already been committed. And wiretapping is a necessity to fighting terrorism. According to General Keith Alexander, the NSA director, the National Security Agency controversially gathered information to prevent 54 terrorist attacks around the world, including 13 in the U.S. Having warrants would not have done any safety for the American people. It would have probably cut this number by half because it would limit our defense against terrorism. Wiretapping is critical while not intrusive. Robert S. Little, the General Counsel Office for the Director of National Intelligence, said that we do not use our intelligence collection at the purpose of representing citizens or any country because of their political and religious beliefs. We collect metadata, information, communications more broadly than we collect the actual content of communication because it is less intrusive than collecting contact. So they just scan through emails. It's not like they're actually going through your belongings and stuff like the TSA. So how do you feel about the TSA going through your stuff publicly and the NSA just quickly searching it? It's not even a human being, it's a computer program, and they only keep the information for 2 minutes or so if 2 minutes if it's not like red alert or if it doesn't come back saying that it's suspicious. The second point that I want to say is that people have a false myth that the NSA operates with no accountability and they live in like a shadow, like there's no way to regulate. And I understand that people are scared that their privacy rights may be taken advantage of. However, the NSA does have to, I'm lost for words. They have a boss and they have to follow rules too. They're not just out there doing whatever they want. They're protecting Americans. And according to the National Security Council, the NSA operates in shadows and are free from extreme external scrutiny or any true accountability is a false myth. In reality, most audience cannot appreciate the classified nature of the intelligence work. And that's basically saying that yeah, people want to know, oh, what are they looking for? What are they looking for? However, Americans, we can't know everything they're doing because that might jeopardize our safety. And he goes on to say that, given the NSA's unique mission, however, it makes perfect sense. The NSA is part of the Department of Defense as well as an intelligence community. That means the NSA is subject to relevant rules and regulations. So for somebody to say that they're scared that their rights will be taken advantage of, they also had to appeal to a boss. So in conclusion, we understand that people are scared about their rights for privacy and privacy being invaded by the US government. However, would Americans rather we be invaded by another terrorist attack and not have the ability to practice those privacy rights in the first place? Yes, the greater good and the safety of the whole nation is more important than the privacy rights of few. They have a boss and they have to follow rules too. They're not just out there doing whatever they want.
So, I just wiretapped you without your permission. I recorded your conversation and I listened to it. What if this was in your home? If it was your personal information? How would you feel that I just listened in on that? Even if I wasn't illegal. Because if you're saying warrantless wiretapping is legal, what's stopping my neighbor from cutting my phone lines and integrating a wiretap without permission?
Well, you just gave the example that what if you were my neighbor and you did that? However, this is a national department. This is the NSA. Like, they are a security system supposed to protect us. So it's different for my neighbor to spy on me and the government to spy on me and to keep me safe.
Do you have any proof that the government has kept you personally safe? Yes, we will always have wiretapping. So why is it such a big deal that we don't have a warrant for it? Either way, you're going to get spied on, but what's the problem with making it legal?
I was actually in New York during 9/11. I was in school. I was in public school. And after that event, like, New York was different. America was different. Like, everybody knows that. I know everybody can account what exactly they were doing on that day. I was in class. So, yeah, after that, like, him declaring war, like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is serious. So that's a personal account that I feel like the government, after that event, they regulated ear control. Every time I fly, they're searching me and they're doing something. And I feel protected when they do that. Yeah, search my bags. Yeah, search everybody. Because that's what they need to do.
You're saying that the NSA operating in the shadows is more is a more positive thing than them being outright and getting warrants. Why do you think that is?
I never said that. Can you repeat the question?
You stated in your attack speech that the NSA operates in the shadows in order to protect American citizens. Why is this more beneficial than them coming outright and getting a warrant
That's time.
or not?
All right, I'm Matthew Hart, and I'll be giving the affirmative attack speech. I'm going to go over, dispute two of the points I gave out today. The first point being that limiting the NSA and other agencies put citizens at risk, and then the second point being wiretapping is fully within the constitutional rights of the president. And so we as the affirmative believe that there should be wiretaps on, or warrants on every wiretap. Now, they said that limiting the NSA and other agencies put citizens at risk, but it is not the limit by requiring the warrant. In fact, warrants are a last resort. The courts have issued, they have a sheet where you have to fill out certain facts in order to obtain a warrant. It's a warrant application. There are 5 steps, and I quote, step 1, you must know what the crime is. 2, the place where the communications are to be intercepted. 3, a description of the communication sought. 4, the identity of the people committing the crime if known. And 5, a full statement on the investigative avenues attempted before the wiretap is put in, unless the investigation was too dangerous. So the only reason they'll put in a wiretap is if they can't get the evidence for any other reason, and if they've exhausted any more of their investigative means. Now, not only this, because of the requirements to obtain a wiretap, all investigations are able to obtain information. And then if they've had this information for the application, not a single one has been turned down as of their numbers they released in 2010 to federal court records. So every wiretap application that's been turned in has passed because of the check that the judicial system has put on the wiretaps. As Benjamin Franklin once said, any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither or lose both. And he makes a good point. If you're giving up some liberty, what's to say you're going to give up something else? You're going to give up, now you're going to have recorders in all of your living rooms. It's going to be Big Brother. That's what they're saying, a slippery slope fallacy for us. Their utilitarian standpoint that the ends outweigh the means of wiretapping, where it doesn't matter what we have to do as long as we can intercept communications and keep you safe. Well, this means nothing, because if we take away our liberties to keep safe, it might just be a negative harm. So being utilitarian in this standpoint would be a negative and not a benefit. And it really outweighs itself. The second point, wiretapping is fully within the constitutional rights of the president. Well, if the president deems that something else is fit, say, we need to exterminate all of the dogs because they put rabies out there. There's no way to determine which ones are wild and which ones are domesticated, so all dogs need to be killed. Suddenly, the president's trying to save all our families from rabies. I guess that's okay. That's what they're saying right here. A perfect example of this is a Red Scare. The president authorized people to have their emails spied on, their phone conversations read or listened to. Unwarranted. This is unwarranted wiretapping, the whole Red Scare. And eventually, anyone suspected of being communist was either fined or jailed. And this is what they want to happen, is a bunch of unwarranted wiretaps on emails and phone calls. And that's what it will lead to if it's not overseen by the court. So the president may have the constitutional right to protect the nation, but this explains why warrantless wiretapping is disapproved of by the general public. 61% of voters prefer to have a warrant, while just 24% of Americans strongly support warrantless wiretaps, and that's according to the American Civil Liberties Union. So warrants defend our liberties and keep the government in check.
Okay, so your point was saying, I can't remember the exact number of wiretaps that have been issued, but every number of them have been passed. So I think you can take history and then project that for the future. So if every number of those wiretaps have been passed, how can you say that the national security agencies and the president are against us? Talking about the Red Scare, but how can from the information you provided, how can you say that the president or the national security agencies are against us if every single one of their proposed wiretaps have been passed through?
Well, that's what we're saying, that the warrant for the wiretap is just a check by the judiciary system on the executive branch that they're not overusing their power. The Red Scare was a case where they were using wiretaps left and right with no real clear evidence on if there was a crime being committed, what was going on. Now the warrant allows, for a little check so that if you want to wiretap someone, that investigation has to go and, you have to exhaust all options beforehand. And if there's no good evidence that there's a crime being committed or some, suspicious activity, that they won't allow that. But because of all these checks, people have been discouraged from either issuing wiretap or applying for one because they realize they don't have enough evidence, or they have enough evidence and so they get one.
So in terms of the Red Scare, I would propose that our wiretapping has been massively improved on since then. And so whereas back then it was just people listening to conversations, now it's a program that runs a series of searches through information that red flags words and red flags topics that they then compile into a case. And so how can you say
Do I have to use this? Because I can project.
If you want to project, that's totally fine.
Okay. My name is Pratiksha Chaudhary, and I am the affirmative defense. So basically, your main argument as a whole is that unwarranted wiretapping can assist the NSA and FBI with prevention of terrorist attacks. But actually, no, it can't. There are other methods of catching terrorists, as mentioned before. For example, CNN stated that the plots mentioned have been identified by using other collection methods, as in the article, did the NSA snooping stop dozens of terrorist attacks. Also, as revealed by ex-contractor Edward Snowden, the NSA never truly thwarted a terrorist attack as it happened. It was never essential in stopping one, by NBC News. Restrictions such as needing a warrant are put into place for a reason, and they're put into reason so people don't misuse the technology to wiretap. You also mentioned how acquiring a warrant for a wiretap is a long process. Time isn't of the essence here. Sure, it does take a long time. It takes about 72 hours sometimes. But as stated in Tech Nerds, why do we need warrantless wiretapping if not a single wiretap warrant request gets accepted? As mentioned before, they are all granted. All of the requests put through are passed if the evidence is sufficient. No one actually mentioned the fact that there is a mass amount of globalization that should be taken into account here. In other words, actions must be justified based on what they do, not their consequences. What if other people in the world had the power to wiretap and they use it against each other? For example, the power that comes with having the technology to do so can enable someone to wiretap, and it can and will be abused if put in the wrong hands. You pointed out before in layman's terms that the need for wiretapping is important and that it allows authority the ability to acquire information that leads to security. But what if wiretapping were that easy to do, and if completely unwarranted, that would mean that there would be more threats to our nations by countries who view us as public enemy number one. Who's to say that if the American government has the technology to silently wiretap the countries like Russia, North Korea, China, Japan, Iraq, and Iran, to name a few, don't have that same technology, that they can't spy on us. Unwarranted wiretapping basically goes against the Fourth Amendment, as it prohibits unreasonable search and seizure, and surely today this should be understood as applying to the search for and seizure of our private communications, texting, emailing, Skype, as well as interference with our physical property, as stated in DebateWise's warranted wiretapping. Also, another note, the NSA ordered that all the information collected be terminated to protect the American citizens' rights. And lastly, America is considered the model of what a democracy should be. How would that possibly help the image of a democratic nation if the government is going against the Constitution that it's set up for its people and invading their aforementioned selfish desire for privacy, to have something still remain sacred or not sacred?
And I'm giving a negative defense for warrantless wiretapping. All right. As we all know that last week was the 1-year anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing. There's sources that say that if we had warrantless wiretapping, we could prevent the Boston bombing marathon. And it's a 72-hour, 3-day, with a warrant for wiretapping, it takes 3 days, 72 hours. But in that 3 days, we could have another 9/11, we could have another Boston Marathon bombing, we could have another Fort Hood shooting. So 3 days is too much time to require a warrant. The Fourth Amendment, right? The Fourth Amendment protects us against searches and seizures. It has the right for security, their person's houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures with no warrants. Since the NSA does not require warrants, opponents like SRS say that this one is not the principal reason the NSA program is legal. The Bush administration says it deters and prevents terrorist attacks against U.S. warrantless wiretaps targeting foreign and border terrorists. The NSA plan is theoretically simplistic, awesome, and its technology cunning to terrifying its potential for abuse. Right? In which you all understand that. As in essence, the ambitious new blueprint would give the agency unprotected surveillance powers in the hunt for terrorists, which is a good thing because we don't want no more 9/11s or shootings. We want to feel safe in our own country. Yet, with warrantless wiretappings, it will take time for those. It would take time to get those terrorists and intercept the information. Throughout American history, intelligence has helped secure our world and freedoms. Globalization and the internet made new threats more active, and technology erased borders and employed individuals to protect great violence. Honors of September 11 brought these issues to the fore across the political spectrum. America recognized that we have to adapt to a world in which a bomb could be built and basically which with the use of NSA, we can code words with red flags algorithm system. It targets, oh, you're buying this, or you're sending, oh, I want this. It puts into a system where the NSA was like, oh, he's buying stuff to make a bomb. And we better look into that. Rather than for Warren, he could already built a bomb and a skull that didn't want it. Today, new capabilities allow intelligence agencies to track who a terrorist is in contact with and follow the trail of his traveling and funding. Thankfully, these efforts have prevented multiple attacks and saved many lives, not just in the United States, but across the globe. So you said that other countries do not have such systems like the NSA does, but I guarantee that they are coming up with stuff like the NSA to prevent their countries from getting attacked from terrorists. Since the United States is number one on almost everybody's list to have a terrorist attack, we need this kind of program to prevent ourselves from future terrorist attacks.
Start.
Okay,
Now it is. Okay. In summary, the legality of wiretapping is a huge issue in this country. People today fear that the government officials will abuse their wiretapping capabilities to spy on innocent American citizens and violate their Fourth Amendment rights. This is an understandable concern. However, it is unlikely to happen because there are laws that prevent the government from misusing wiretapping by requiring warrants. The Fourth Amendment in modern tort law, which includes four categories of invasion of privacy, prove this. The first tort law category is the intrusion of solitude, the physical or electronic intrusion into one's private quarters. 2, the public disclosure of private facts, the dissemination of truthful and private information which a reasonable person would find objectionable. 3, false light, the publication of facts in which place a person in false light, even though the facts themselves may not be defamatory. And 4, appropriation, the unauthorized use of a person's name or likeness to obtain some sort of legal benefits. All of these are violated when warrantless wiretapping comes into play. When a warrant is given, you are being told by the government you are having to do this, and you have to consent to it because there is a legal right for them to do it. But without this warrant, they are free to do whatever they want, and your rights are being violated. The Ninth Amendment of the Constitution declares that the fact that a right is not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution does not mean that the government can infringe on that right. So just because it isn't stated specifically in the Constitution that warrantless wiretaps are not against rights, that doesn't mean that they aren't. The Supreme Court recognized the 14th Amendment as providing a substantive due process right to privacy. These laws and acts were all created in order to ensure the privacy of you as citizens and are stated in the Constitution. That's all I got.
sorry, I have enchiladas. You think it's like a death row? That's not funny. No. There's a button on the top, it'll turn green. Top button's in the middle, on the top. There you go.
Yeah, that's it.
It's fine, just make sure you hold it up.
Just hold it up. All right.
There you go.
All right, check. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
All right. My name is Curtis Renberg, and I will be doing the summary with the negative.
Alright, now there is no doubt that wiretapping is very controversial and causes many emotions to surface around the issue. Now, on one hand, wiretapping is necessary in order to protect Americans from future terrorist attacks. The war on terror is different from any war that we have faced. The rules are fuzzy, the enemy is slippery, and our very homeland has become the battleground for future attacks. Now, gathering intelligence, a restraint on wiretapping puts the U.S. at risk for another terrorist attack. Gathering intelligence is an essential component to war, along with warrantless wiretaps. However, there are those individuals who believe that warrantless wiretaps infringes upon their civil liberties, as my opponent stated earlier. Now, I challenge those individuals to take an in-depth look at the national security program to fully assess their privacy concerns. For one, the program only collects phone numbers along with time duration of phone calls, but the location, the names, and the contents are not recorded. So a lot of, their main argument, at least a lot of what I heard, they were speaking in hypotheticals. They were like basically saying, oh, what if they spy on us, or they're spying on my neighbor, this and that. The U.S., we're not trying to spy on you. We're not trying to spy on your neighbors. We're trying to, catch criminals and catch terrorists. And the program doesn't even, we don't have your name, we don't have the content recorded, so I don't understand how we would be infringing upon your rights, but we don't even know what's going on. Now, with all that being said, the opportunity costs need to be weighed in order to gauge which alternative is worth the return. Now, would Americans rather the overall protection of their privacy rights, or would you rather prevent another attack on U.S. soil? I have a quote from the NSA director, and he said that if the call records program would have been in place prior to the 9/11 terrorist attacks, then these would have been prevented. Or better yet, as Ryan stated earlier, the Boston bombing, as we celebrate the anniversary of that, if we would have had the call records program in place, maybe we could have prevented that. Now, the U.S., we must remain vigilant against terrorist attacks against our homeland. And that pretty much sums up the negative summary.
Alright. And that's the end of the debate. I'd like to thank both sides for participating in that debate. It was very educational and informational. So thank you all for attending. And there are many more debates to come, so hopefully you'll stick around and look at those.
Round 2 is starting as soon as possible.